My name is Daniel Ortiz. I'm 32 years old, and for most of my adult life, I've been called one word over and over again: failure. But the morning I logged into my crypto wallet and saw $9,750,000 sitting in my account, I realized something. Failure doesn't look like 8 digits glowing on a screen. Failure doesn't come with lawyers calling you sir or bankers offering you champagne. Failure looks like the people who doubted you, staring at you with their mouths hanging open when the truth finally hits. I can still remember the moment like it happened yesterday. The apartment was quiet, just me and the hum of my old fridge. I'd stayed up late working, half out of habit, half out of stubbornness. My phone buzzed, a notification from the exchange. I almost ignored it. I'd been burned before, watching coins spike one day and crash the next. But something in me told me to check. I opened the app, expecting disappointment. Instead, I froze. The balance stared back at me. $9,750,000.12. At first, I thought it was a glitch. I blinked, refreshed the screen. The number didn't change. My heart raced so hard I thought I'd collapse. Years of holding, waiting, biting my tongue every time someone mocked me. It had all led to this, and in that moment, I didn't think of celebrations. I didn't think of yachts, cars, or houses. I thought of my uncle, the man who spent years calling me worthless, who laughed at me across the dinner table, telling my cousins I was the example of what not to be. "See, kids," he'd say, pointing at me with a fork. "That's what happens when you waste your life chasing nonsense. You end up a failure." His voice echoed in my head as I sat there, phone trembling in my hands, staring at nearly $10 million. I didn't smile. I didn't scream. I didn't even tell anyone, because I knew the truth now. And the truth had a way of traveling. Sooner or later, the same man who loved to humiliate me in front of family would hear the story. He'd see the headline. He'd hear the whispers. And when he realized the nephew he called a failure had become a multi-millionaire overnight, the silence in that room would be sweeter than any celebration I could ever throw. He called me a failure. But when I unlocked my wallet, I realized I'd been holding the sharpest revenge of all along. Before that morning, when my phone screen changed everything, my life looked painfully ordinary. I grew up in a small town in Indiana where hard work was measured in calloused hands and long shifts, not glowing monitors or numbers on a screen. My father was a mechanic, my mother a school secretary. They taught me the value of honesty, effort, and loyalty. But dreams? Dreams were luxuries. People around me believed in paychecks, not possibilities. I wasn't lazy. I worked. I stocked shelves. I washed cars. I put in hours wherever I could. But the jobs never felt like a life. They were survival, not growth. And late at night, when others were sleeping, I'd sit at my old laptop, scrolling through forums, reading about something most people in my town laughed at: cryptocurrency. It wasn't glamorous then. Bitcoin was still a gamble. Altcoins a bigger one. But I saw patterns others didn't. I wasn't trying to get rich overnight. I was fascinated. The idea of decentralized money, of digital value beyond banks and bosses, lit a fire in me. I started buying small amounts. Nothing crazy, just what I could scrape together after rent and groceries. $50 here, $100 there. I told myself, if it goes to zero, so be it. At least I tried. But not everyone saw it that way. My uncle, Victor, made sure of that. Victor was the kind of man who measured success by the width of your wallet and the shine of your truck. He ran a construction business, wore big watches, and never missed a chance to remind everyone of his real achievements. At family gatherings, he held court like a king, tossing out stories of deals closed and properties flipped. And me, I was his favorite punchline. "Still staring at that laptop, Danny?" He'd sneer over his beer. "One of these days, you'll realize Monopoly money won't pay your bills." Everyone laughed. My cousins, my aunts, even my parents sometimes smiled nervously, not wanting to pick a fight. I laughed too, because what else could I do? But inside, it cut deep. I wanted to believe family meant support, but with Victor, it meant humiliation. Every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every barbecue, there he was, reminding me in front of everyone that I was nothing. "See, kids," he'd say, pointing his fork at me. "This is what happens when you chase nonsense instead of working with your hands." "Don't be like Danny," I tried to defend myself once. I explained blockchain, decentralization, the potential of smart contracts. He laughed so hard he nearly spilled his drink. "Listen to this guy. He thinks he's smarter than the banks." Newsflash, Danny, you're broke. You'll always be broke. After that, I stopped arguing. I grew quieter at family gatherings. I sat through the jokes, the whispers, the pitying looks from relatives who compared me to my cousins with real jobs. One was a nurse, one worked in finance, one had just bought a house. And me? I was the dreamer, the odd one out, the failure. But what they didn't see were the nights I spent studying, researching, watching markets while they slept. What they didn't see were the sacrifices, saying no to nights out, living in a small, cramped apartment, skipping vacations because every spare dollar I had went into my investments. There were times I doubted myself, times when the market dipped so low I thought Victor might be right. Times I wanted to cash out, cut my losses, and just join the world of real jobs and safe paychecks. But something in me refused, because deep down, I wasn't chasing money. I was chasing freedom. The freedom to live on my own terms, without men like Victor deciding whether I was worthy or not. Still, the ridicule never stopped. The last Thanksgiving before everything changed, Victor made a toast in front of the whole family. Here's to real men, men who know the value of work. And here's to my nephew Danny, who proves every year that failure can still show up for dinner. The table roared with laughter. I stared at my plate, cheeks burning, fists clenched under the table. That night, driving home in the cold, I made myself a promise. I wouldn't argue with him anymore. I wouldn't waste breath trying to convince anyone. I'd let the numbers do the talking. And as I sat at my laptop in the quiet of my apartment, charts glowing on the screen, I whispered to myself, one day, just one day, that's all it will take to silence him. I thought family was supposed to believe in you. But mine sharpened their knives at every meal, so I sharpened something else, my patience. The months that followed that last Thanksgiving felt heavier than most. It wasn't just the cold Indiana winter biting at my skin. It was the weight of everyone's doubt pressing against me. Victor's words clung to me like smoke. Failure. He never let me forget it. And neither did the whispers from cousins or the quiet sighs from relatives who looked at me like I was wasting my life. At work, it wasn't much different. I held down odd jobs to pay bills, freelance coding projects, temp IT shifts, customer support gigs. Nothing flashy, nothing secure. When coworkers asked what I did in my free time and I mentioned crypto, Their eyebrows shot up like I'd admitted to gambling at casinos. "That stuff's a scam," they'd mutter. But I didn't argue. I just kept my head down and kept watching. The market was brutal. One week, I'd see my holdings jump by thousands. The next, they'd sink so low, I wondered if Victor might be right after all. It felt like riding a roller coaster in the dark, every climb exhilarating, every drop stomach churning. Still, I held on. Because every dip, every crash, every moment of doubt felt like a test. Was I stubborn or was I faithful to my vision? Even I wasn't sure anymore. Meanwhile, Victor's ridicule reached new heights. At a family cookout that spring, he made a show of pulling out his car keys and dangling them in front of everyone. "This," he said, gesturing to his brand new truck, "is what success looks like." Not sitting in a basement, clicking buttons. He looked at me across the table and smirked. Danny here still thinks magic internet coins will save him. Laughter rippled around the yard. I didn't laugh. I didn't defend myself. I just stared at my plate, letting the moment burn itself into my memory. Because something inside me was changing. I used to get angry, used to feel humiliated. Now, I felt patient, silent, focused. I began to notice things others ignored. Little shifts in the market, patterns in trading volumes, news cycles that hinted at bigger moves ahead. The same way my uncle could look at a half-built house and see the finished structure, I could look at those charts and see storms forming on the horizon. And with every red candle, every dip that made others panic, I whispered to myself, "Hold, just hold." Still, the tension grew. The more silent I became, the more Victor pushed. Maybe he thought my quiet was surrender. Maybe he needed my failure to validate his own version of success. Whatever it was, he doubled down. At my cousin's graduation, he raised his glass and said, "Here's to the future, to jobs that pay, to real success, not fairy tales." Then he turned, loud enough for the whole room to hear, "Danny, maybe one day you'll join the real world." People laughed politely. My mother's face turned red. I just smiled faintly, my lips tight, and stayed silent. But that silence wasn't weakness, it was strategy, because by then I had stopped trying to prove anything with words. Words had never worked. Victor didn't respect arguments. He respected numbers. He respected results. And soon, I knew, the numbers would come. Late one night, sitting in my apartment, the glow of my laptop the only light in the room, I refreshed the chart for the 100th time. Something stirred deep in my chest. The price was climbing, faster than it had in months. Not a spike, a surge. I leaned forward, heart pounding, watching as green candles stacked one after the other. Notifications buzzed across forums, investors shouting, analysts scrambling to explain. But I didn't need their explanations. I understood what was happening. It wasn't just a pump, it was momentum, the kind that changes everything overnight. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. My eyes locked on the screen as the numbers climbed higher, faster, stronger. And with every digit that shifted, Victor's voice echoed in my head. Failure, waste of space, fairy tales. But for the first time, I didn't feel anger when I heard his voice. I felt calm, because I knew what was coming. The unraveling wasn't just the market shifting. It was the ground under my uncle's mockery beginning to crack. The insults that once stung were about to turn into the very fuel of my revenge. And then, at 2:11 a.m., my phone buzzed. A notification lit up the screen, brighter than anything I'd ever seen. I stared at it, my hands trembling. This wasn't noise. This wasn't hope. This was the beginning. At 2:11 a.m., the notification changed everything. And for the first time in my life, I whispered back to my uncle's voice in my head, "Watch me." When my phone buzzed that night, I thought it was just another market alert. I almost ignored it. I'd seen enough false alarms, coins spiking and crashing before I could blink. But something in me said, "Check it." I unlocked the screen, and there it was. A balance that didn't belong in my life. Glowing in bold numbers. $9,750,000.12. At first, I laughed. A short, disbelieving laugh. I refreshed the app. The number stayed. I logged out, logged back in, double-checked the exchange. It was real. My hands trembled as I reached for my laptop, opening multiple wallets, multiple trackers, every line confirming the same thing. Overnight, my quiet patience had turned into nearly $10 million. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling, heart hammering in my chest. For years, I'd been mocked, ridiculed, dismissed, and in one night, the game had changed forever. But the strangest part? I didn't scream. I didn't jump up and down or pop champagne. I just sat there, still. Because the snap wasn't joy. The snap was clarity. Victor's voice echoed in my head, word for word from every family gathering. "You'll never amount to anything. Real men work with their hands. You're a failure." I thought about all the times I swallowed those words, all the dinners I endured in silence while laughter rolled around the table. And now, here I was, holding the kind of number that would silence them all without me ever raising my voice. That was the moment I knew. I didn't need to argue with Victor. I didn't need to defend myself. I didn't need to explain blockchain or smart contracts or digital assets to people who had laughed in my face. All I had to do was wait. The money was more than wealth. It was proof. Proof that I wasn't chasing fairy tales. Proof that patience beats arrogance. Proof that the man they called a failure had outlasted every insult. I closed the laptop slowly, like sealing away a secret weapon. My reflection in the dark screen stared back at me, older, tired, but steadier than I had ever looked before. This wasn't about greed anymore. It wasn't even about the money. It was about the silence that would come when the truth revealed itself. I whispered it out loud, just once. "You were wrong, Victor." I didn't call him. I didn't text anyone. I didn't run to social media to brag. That would have cheapened it. No, my revenge would be colder, quieter, more devastating. Because when the story came out, when the family saw the truth, when my uncle realized the nephew he mocked had become a multimillionaire overnight, the silence in that room would say everything, and I wouldn't have to utter a single word. I didn't scream. I didn't celebrate. I just whispered to the empty room, "You were wrong." Because from that moment forward, I knew everything had changed. The morning after the numbers appeared, I woke up half convinced it had been a dream. My eyes shot to my phone before I even sat up, but it wasn't a dream. The balance was still there, $9,750,000.12. For a few minutes, I just sat at the edge of my bed, staring at the screen, heart pounding. Then a strange calm settled over me. This wasn't a lottery win. This wasn't dumb luck. This was years of sacrifice, years of being mocked, finally paying off. And if I was going to carry it properly, I needed to move carefully. That's when the strategy began. The first thing I did was call a lawyer. Not a friend, not my parents, not even my closest buddy, just a lawyer. I booked a discreet consultation and laid everything out: the wallet, the history, the holdings. The attorney's eyes widened, but he stayed professional. "We'll protect it," he said. "Step 1 is security. Step 2 is structure." Step 1 meant locking everything down. New hardware wallets, cold storage, multi-signature protections. I wasn't about to let my life's vindication vanish to a hacker. Step 2 meant building the financial walls, LLCs, trusts, tax strategies. The kind of stuff my uncle bragged about without ever understanding. I spent the next few weeks in quiet meetings with lawyers, accountants, financial advisors. My days were filled with paperwork, my nights with whispered prayers of thanks. Not once did I mention it to family. Not once did I post a hint online. Meanwhile, life around me stayed the same. Victor was louder than ever, throwing digs whenever he could. At a Sunday cookout, he slapped his belly and said, "Danny, you still playing with your funny money? You're pushing 33 with nothing to show for it. You're a disappointment, son." The words didn't sting this time, not even a little. Because as he mocked me in front of cousins and aunts, I was sitting on a number that would drown him in silence the moment it surfaced. I just smiled faintly, sipped my soda, and said nothing. The beauty of silence is that it sharpens the eventual impact. Behind closed doors, I was moving mountains. I signed papers for my first property purchase, a modern downtown condo, bought in cash. I diversified into safer investments, created accounts for my parents, even started mapping out charitable foundations. But to Victor, to everyone, I was still the broke nephew, the family failure. And that was exactly how I wanted it. Because revenge is sweetest when it arrives unannounced. I rehearsed the reveal in my head, not as an outburst, but as a calm storm. I pictured sitting at the table while Victor bragged about his latest construction deal, waiting for someone to ask me about work. And instead of fumbling for excuses, I'd let the truth slip out, quiet, casual, devastating. I could see his face already, the smirk fading, the color draining, the silence stretching across the room. But I wasn't in a rush. Timing mattered, so I kept preparing. I upgraded my wardrobe, not flashy, just sharper. Tailored shirts, clean watches, polished shoes. Enough to look different, but not enough for them to guess why. I practiced patience in conversations, letting others brag, letting Victor hold court. Because I knew soon the court would collapse. The hardest part wasn't the preparation itself, it was keeping the secret. There were nights I lay awake, phone on my chest, tempted to call someone, to shout the truth just to hear it echo back. But I resisted, because secrets, when timed right, become weapons. And this one would cut deeper than any insult Victor had ever thrown. The strategy was simple, but relentless. Protect the money. Build the future. Say nothing. Every move I made, every document I signed, every account I opened, it was all another brick in a fortress he couldn't touch. Meanwhile, he kept mocking me. At my cousin's birthday, he laughed loud enough for the room to hear. Careful, Danny might try to pay the bill in internet points. Everyone chuckled. I chuckled too. Because if they only knew, that single internet point could have paid the bill 1,000 times over. It was almost funny, watching him puff up with pride, thinking he'd won the game of life. Because the truth was sitting in my pocket the whole time. 9,750,000 reasons why his words no longer mattered. And soon, those reasons would speak louder than any defense I could ever give. He thought I was broke. He thought I was beaten. But what he didn't know was that I was weeks away from revealing the kind of truth that would silence him forever. The moment came sooner than I expected. It was my aunt's birthday, a family gathering Victor had orchestrated like always. He loved being the center of attention, grilling steaks, pouring drinks, bragging about his latest project. That day, he was louder than ever. He slapped his hand on the patio table and launched into one of his favorite routines. You know what real success looks like. Hard work, sweat, blood in the dirt, not sitting around on computers like some people. His eyes flicked toward me, his smirk daring me to argue. The cousins laughed. My parents looked uncomfortable. My stomach didn't twist this time. I just sat there calmly, sipping my drink. Then one of my younger cousins, curious and innocent, asked the question that lit the fuse. "Danny, what do you even do these days? Do you, make money?" The table chuckled. Victor leaned back, grinning. "Go on, Danny. Tell them about your magic internet coins." That was the moment. I set my glass down, reached into my pocket, and pulled out my phone. For years, that device had been my quiet burden, my secret world. Now it was about to become my weapon. I unlocked my crypto wallet, turned the screen, and placed it on the table. The number glowed in the afternoon sun. $9,750,000.12. For a heartbeat, no one moved. No one breathed. Then my aunt gasped. My cousin leaned forward, eyes wide. "Wait, is that real?" Victor's smile faltered. He squinted at the screen, trying to find the joke. But there was no joke, no punchline, just numbers so far beyond anything he had ever imagined me touching. I leaned back, calm as a still lake. "You asked what I do," I said quietly. "That's what I do." The silence was thicker than smoke. Victor opened his mouth, closed it again, then forced a laugh. "Yeah, right. That's fake. Some app trick. You can't..." I refreshed the screen. The number stayed. I scrolled to show the transaction history, the exchanges, the wallet verification. Every line was real, every digit undeniable. The laughter died completely. One cousin whispered, "Holy, Danny, you're loaded." Another muttered, 9 million. I didn't nod. I didn't brag. I let the number do the talking. Victor's face turned red, then pale. He reached for his drink with a shaky hand. For the first time in my life, he had no words. And in that silence, I felt the years of mockery collapse like a house of cards. Every insult, every sneer, every humiliating toast, gone in an instant, crushed under the weight of $9 million. I didn't need to say it, but I did anyway, softly. "You called me a failure, Victor. Looks like failure pays better than construction." The cousins burst out laughing, not at me this time, but at him. My parents looked at me with stunned pride. My aunt wiped her eyes, whispering, "I had no idea." Victor sat frozen, his fork untouched, his empire of arrogance crumbling right there on the patio. The party went on around him, but he never recovered. Every conversation shifted toward me. Questions, congratulations, disbelief. For once, I wasn't invisible. I wasn't the punchline. I was the story. And Victor, he faded into the background, smaller with every passing minute. That was the fall. Not with shouting, not with fists, not with anger, just with truth. Cold, undeniable, devastating truth. When I left that night, I didn't gloat. I didn't rub it in. I hugged my parents, thanked my aunt, and walked past Victor without a word. His eyes followed me, hollow, broken, because he knew. He had spent years calling me a failure. But in the end, the only failure was his own, failing to see what was right in front of him all along. The room went silent. My uncle, who had spent years mocking me, couldn't even meet my eyes. Because failure doesn't unlock $9 million overnight. Life after that night changed in ways I still struggle to put into words, not because of the money. I had been planning for that in silence long before the reveal. The lawyers, the accountants, the structures were already in place. What changed was the way people looked at me. The same cousins who once laughed when Victor mocked me now leaned in whenever I spoke. The same relatives who dismissed my dreams now treated me like proof that patience pays. Even my parents, who had tried their best to support me quietly, finally looked relieved, like they could stop defending me in whispers behind closed doors. But the real change was Victor. The man who once filled every room with his booming voice barely spoke to me after that night. He avoided eye contact at gatherings, no longer cracking jokes at my expense. His empire of arrogance collapsed with a single number on a screen, and he never recovered. Here's the truth. I didn't need him to apologize. I didn't need his respect. The silence was enough. Because in that silence, I found freedom. I bought my parents a house near the lake they'd always dreamed of. I upgraded my life, yes. Better home, better car, the kind of security I'd only imagined. But more than that, I built a future. Diversified investments, charitable projects, even plans to help kids from small towns who, like me, dared to dream beyond what everyone told them was possible. Every time I log into my wallet, I don't see numbers. I see years of being underestimated, years of swallowing humiliation, years of silence turning into something louder than any insult ever hurled at me. Victor used to say I was chasing fairy tales, but the truth is, fairy tales are stories where the underdog wins, where patience and grit turn into triumph. And that's exactly what happened. The lesson I carry now is simple. Being underestimated can be your greatest advantage. Let them laugh. Let them call you names. Let them sharpen their knives. Because silence and patience are weapons. And when the time comes, your results will speak louder than any defense you could ever make. He called me a failure. But failure doesn't unlock $9 million overnight. And when my uncle finally realized that, it wasn't me who looked small anymore. It was him. If you've ever been underestimated, mocked, or told you were wasting your time, remember this: silence and patience aren't weakness. They're power. Don't waste energy arguing with people who don't believe in you. Let your results do the talking. If this story spoke to you, share it with someone who needs that reminder. And don't forget to subscribe for more real stories of revenge, justice, and redemption.